So let me just go through now some of the normal reactions to grief on how we feel, how we behave, etc. And just because sometimes I think it helps people to see all the various things that can happen to us. Some of them are more obvious for sure than others. Certainly sadness, that's obvious. Anger, I'd like to talk about anger for one reason. Most of the people that I've seen, unless there's a definite reason to be angry at somebody or at something, like if a drunk driver kills a kid, I mean, you know you can be angry at that child. I mean, at that person who did that. But in general, anger is much more diffuse. It's much more general. I'm just mad at the world or whatever. But my experience with anger often is that when we're not allowed to be sad, we get angry. In fact, with children, I say, you know, if you're not sad, you get mad. Because what happens to us is that when we start wanting to cry, when we start wanting to talk about someone that's died, and it's getting on in time, maybe a month, God forbid, no one ever wants to talk to us even that long, and then no one wants to talk about it anymore, we feel like no one wants us to express it anymore, that's frustrating, and that makes us angry. And people will say to me, I started getting very edgy recently, and I'll say to them, well, when was the last time you had a good cry? Oh, I haven't been doing that for weeks. I say, well, that's the reason. So if you find that you're getting that way, often it's because we're no longer expressing the sadness as much, and it's coming out sort of in a different way. Guilt, we are all created. I used to think one denomination had had guilt to them, but now I've come to work with people from all different faiths, and we all think we're more guilty than the next. So I don't know why, but guilt is something that grieving tends to bring out a lot. People feel guilty about all sorts of stuff that they probably ought not feel guilty about. But the thing that bothers me the most is our society tries to talk people out of guilt constantly. And you may think that's surprising me to say, but the problem is I can't talk you out of feeling guilty. I need to help you deal with feeling guilty to the point where you no longer put that guilt on yourself. And so when someone says to you, or you say to someone else, like this man said to me, I feel incredibly guilty that I wasn't with my mother enough before she died. And the reality is this man probably spent more hours with his mother than most human beings would ever do. And I said to him, it must really feel hard to not have her with you anymore. Rather than everyone else is going to say to him, how could you feel guilty? Think about all that you did. See, think about all you did and everything else. That's trying to, again, convince his brain. But his brain knows he did everything, right? But it's his heart. He's telling you he just misses his mother through saying that, I wish I could have done more. In many ways, it's like he wanted to rewind the videotape. I don't like the ending. I want to go back and start it over again so we go down a different path where she doesn't die this time. That's what, in society, in my mind, and I think all of us are guilty of this, is society is very good at trying to talk people out of how they feel. Just think about it. Every time someone says to you, I feel such and such, often we'll hear, don't feel that way. You should keep remember this, or don't blah, blah, blah. We do it to kids. We do it to adults. We do it a lot. Anxiety is obviously a very common experience with this. Loneliness, fatigue, it's very tiring to grieve. This is a very tiring process. So if you find yourself, I just can't do what I used to do, I used to jog, I can't do it anymore, I used to whatever, I find it hard just to go to work and I come home and I'm exhausted, that's very common and very normal. Helplessness, shock, we could be yearning for the person, we could have a sense we really can't wait for them to come back even though we know they're not, and people will tell me they reach for the telephone to make the phone call to mom even though they know they can't, and they kind of feel, that's when they say to me, am I going crazy? I mean, that's a very common thing that happens because we've done it so much and we want to do it so much more. And so there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. The next two are kind of weird in a way, but they happen a lot, is emancipation or relief. And that is that if we've been a caretaker, this is primarily in a caretaking relationship where we've taken care of someone who was very sick for a number of years, and then that person dies, it's very natural to realize that, wow, I got my whole day to myself. Or I can go to the store anytime. I don't have to get someone to come in. And now, as soon as they feel that way, they go over to the other column and feel guilty right away because they're saying, oh my goodness, how can I, what a horrible person I am. But the reality is that's normal because you do have this time now that you didn't have, and there is some relief in not having to care for somebody, or some emancipation or freedom, or to come and go as you see fit. And lastly on here I have numbness, but as we talked about, some people can just constantly feel like they're in a state of shock going through this.